And welcome back to Face the Nation. We have an all-star lineup of political reporters today. The chief correspondent for the Washington Post, Dan Balz. We welcome Jonathan Martin, who's the national political correspondent for the Times. And we have Amy Walter, national editor of the Cook Political Report. And it wouldn't be a political panel without our own John Dickerson. We have to pay him anyway. We're glad to have you, John. Glad to have you. John, welcome. Your first appearance here on Face the Nation. You know, you were the one that Bobby Jindal first said to the Republicans that kind of stopped being the stupid party.
Right.
And it was interesting to hear what he had to say today when I asked him, did he think they'd stopped?
Well, there are, current examples of the fact that you still have those comments. Mike Huckabee a couple weeks ago talking about women's libidos, for example. And when that kind of thing happens, Democrats are gleeful because it's exactly the kind of fodder that they want, and especially in a midterm year when turnout typically drops, to elevate their own base, African Americans, Hispanics, young voters, women. And so those are the kind of comments that you see party leaders like Jindal cringe when they hear, because they want this election to be entirely about Obamacare implementation, the state of the economy, President Obama's overall popularity, and any time that Democrats have an opportunity to change the topic, it scares Republicans.
And yet it makes it great for somebody like a governor, like Bobby Jindal, to have the focus on how dysfunctional Washington Republicans are. They get to make the case, well, this is why you need to to elect a governor in 2016. Forget about all those guys who are trying to run from Washington. We're the people that are solving the problems, and we aren't making those same mistakes.
And that's one of the reasons you see so little happening in Congress. There are two ways to fix being what Governor Jindal called the stupid party. One is to say smarter things. The other is to not get into the kinds of debates in which people say stupid things. And so when you see Republicans not deciding to take on immigration, in the same way, Democrats are not taking on trade. They're not taking on the increase in the cost of living on Social Security and other measures. Both sides have decided we're not going to take any risks because we don't want to say anything that's going to get us shooting at each other when we want to all be shooting at the other side. But that leads to what you say, which is, achievement in becoming the most do-nothingest Congress.
But, when they say we're not going to do any of these things, you have what happened in the Senate, where Ted Cruz goes in there and forces Republicans who were going to be able to vote against raising the debt ceiling. He made them vote, and they had to vote yes to break the filibuster. So there is a disconnect, I think, Dan.
Well, there's a disconnect and there's a division within the Republican Party, just as there are some divisions within the Democratic Party. But the Republicans are trying to sort out what kind of a party they want to be, not just philosophically, but stylistically. And I think that that's the big battle that we're seeing playing out. And as Amy said, governors have got one version of this, which is don't look at Washington, look at what we're doing in the states. I mean, what's going on in the states is really important right now, because you have at this point in history more states than we've had in many, many years under unified control of either Republicans or Democrats, and they're going in different directions. And so the country can look at Washington and say, we have no idea what they're doing because they're not doing anything. And you can look at the states and say, this is the Republican model and this is the Democratic model, and that's what's going to be on display in these state races this year.
And the polarization that we see in Washington, and often lament in Washington, is very much evident in the state capitals too. In fact, it's even on more vivid display in the state capitals, because as Dan said, you've got these liberal states and conservative states which are pursuing some pretty remarkably different policy agendas, and it leads to the fact that we increasingly have two different countries.
What about, we're going to have elections here, the off-year elections. How's that shaking down, Amy?
Well, this is not a great year to be a Democrat. It's usually not a great year to be the party in the White House in a second-term, midterm, right? But when you look at the playing field, the seats that Democrats have to defend in the Senate are very tough. They're in very, very deep red states. The economy is doing better than it was 4 years ago, but it's not great. The president's numbers are obviously much lower than they were even going into the 2012 election. So it's setting up not particularly well for Democrats. What they're hoping—
And you haven't mentioned the health care.
Right, you're right, I haven't even mentioned that the issue environment. This is why you're seeing, to Jonathan's point about changing the subject, this is why you're seeing Democrats talking incessantly about things like the minimum wage. They want to make this debate about economic inequality. They want it to look a lot like 2012, where it was Democrats were the people looking out for you, we're on your side. Republicans are the ones that are on the side of big business and big insurance. If they can make that debate work,
the
they think.
issues.
And,
yeah, you know.
So what happens on the health care thing? What are they going to do here? I mean, where is this thing?
well, I think
solve it all, John.
Yes, right. I think Democrats hope that it will continue to sign people up. They'll be able to point to numbers of people signing up that's below the targets that the White House officially set, and then they've just got to hope against hope that there isn't one of these surprises. The big political risk on the Affordable Care Act is that there's some surprise, either a delay or a report from the Congressional Budget Office that reminds voters who already have health care but who've always been worried that this big thing out there is going to crash into their existing health care, that every time they're reminded of the surprises inherent in this enormous program, they get nervous. And so that's the thing that Democrats have to worry about, is that they're just surprises that then candidates will have to quickly come back. One thing shift we have noticed, though, is Republicans are less and less running on the idea of repeal. And so that'll be interesting to watch. They'll talk about replacement, but less ripping it out because of the hangover of...
And they have now presented an alternative.
Right.
They have, which is another reminder in how we've shifted from repeal. In other words, now it's on kind of trying to replace it with something.
What's so striking to me, Bob, is that you've got the health care implementation taking place in some states quite successfully. I was talking yesterday to Governor Steve Beshear from Kentucky, which has really been a model of implementation of the Affordable Care Act. He said they have added coverage to 244,000 Kentuckians. At the same time that is happening in that state this year, in the Senate race, Mitch McConnell's entire campaign against his challenger is to hang the issue of Obamacare around her neck, Alice Lundgren Grimes. So there is this sort of odd duality of this implementation of a law that is adding coverage to thousands of people in this state, and the candidate for the Senate, the Democrat, can't even talk about it.
Well, there's another duality that we're seeing in these races, which is, as you all mentioned, the Democrats want to talk about the degree to which the economy is improving, and yet they want to run against governors. They want to run against Republican governors for not doing enough on the economy.
Right.
So both sides are conflicted in the way they're delivering these messages on some of these big issues.
Well, if you wonder what the other shoe's going to drop on healthcare, it's that in October and September and October, people who have employee-sponsored healthcare, they get their rates for 2015. So right before the election, you're going to get something in the mail that tells you.
Let me ask you about that. Do you think that Republicans can take the Senate down? Or where do you think that is right now?
I think that there is a distinct possibility that they can. I mean, I had thought earlier that they had even more of an uphill slog to do it. I think the map now is such that they could certainly do it. I mean, there are plenty of races available that we see that are, well within play. So yes, it's very possible. If I were Democrats at this point, I would be quite nervous.
And they are.
And my sense is the House will stay in Republican.
Yes, I think everybody agrees on that.
Let's talk a little presidential politics. We have two people at the table here, both of whom would like to run. I don't think there's any question about that. Can anybody get past Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination?
Well, I mean, we should never say never, because if we had been here, 8 years ago, we would have said, can anybody get past Hillary Clinton in 2008? And it turned out somebody was able to do that. On the other hand, I think everybody agrees at this point that if she runs, she's in an even stronger position to win the nomination than she was the last time. There is no Barack Obama-like person lurking on the horizon in the Democratic race. So you would have to say she is a formidable front runner for the nomination. But we've got a long way to go.
What do you think, John?
Oh, I think that if she does run, she will be historically formidable, but I don't think that's going to stop the fact that there will still be a primary in their party. Somebody else is going to run. Governor O'Malley, I think, for example, still probably wants to run, even if she's in the race. The question to me is, what is the nature of that primary? Is it a sort of polite debate where somebody like Governor O'Malley makes an investment in his future, or does it get to be a little bit more of a traditional, tough, sort of no-holds-barred debate? I think that's still an open question.
Let me ask you this. Well, on the other side of the street, and I base this on nothing but watching television, I'm seeing Mitt Romney show up on television more and more and more. Does anybody think he might be actually thinking about trying again?
Well, I mean, I think he's doing some rehabilitation. There's a little, so personally, but I think also it's funny, and when he was running for president, there were a bunch of establishment money types who ran over to Chris Christie and said, will you please run? Right. Well, now that Chris Christie is having his prolonged indigestion because of this Washington Bridge problem, George Washington Bridge problem, there's a little bit of the establishment looking around for a kind of similar candidate. I think that's what that may be a little bit about. It's not serious. I think another interesting thing on the Republican side is you have 3 Republican senators, freshman Republican senators thinking about maybe running. I just don't know how the Republican Party, after spending so many years attacking a former freshman senator, saying he didn't have enough experience, is then going to turn to a Republican freshman senator. I think that's a real thing to watch in the Republican
So what
race.
about something else to watch, and that is, of course, Christie. Is he done? Will this hurt him? Can he get past this whole bridge business now?
Well, he may be able to get past this. He's certainly damaged at this point. He's been here this weekend for the National Governors Association meeting, and he's been not visible in public for the most part. And I think that tells you a little bit about his condition right now. He's got to get through this. There's going to be more that we're going to learn about it. I think it's too early to say whether he's completely gone, but he's hurt. But can he come back? He might be able to.
A sign of his image makeover. They used to put out videos of him tussling with voters. After his most recent town hall, his office put out a picture of him giving a little high five to a little girl.
Of course.
Yeah, next time it's going to be puppies.
Right. It's always, you know who you don't want to be at this point in an election is the front runner. And so Christie has gotten that. Marco Rubio got a taste of that. We're now seeing Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, who was seen as coming up in the ranks. He's having his own issues back home about emails being released in investigation in his office. So the person you really want to be is the one who's kind of there in the background, not getting a whole lot of attention.
There really is no
Well,
front
but
runner.
except
There is
if
none.
you're,
That's right.
if in the case of Hillary Clinton, she's more than a front runner. She's this giant, looming figure
right.
now, it
Yes.
appears. And I mean, every poll shows her at about 70%.
Very, very formidable. And a sitting vice president,
And
two-term
among
vice
Democrats.
president is far behind her. There really is no modern comparison. I mean, maybe Eisenhower is the closest, comparison, but on the Republican side, there really is no front runner. And every 4 years, there's at least somebody that you think is going to be the guy for the Republicans in advance, and it's just not clear at this point at all.
Which is there is a real battle within the party about who it wants to be, and there shouldn't be a front runner.
That is a very good point, because Republicans traditionally, it's been kind of wait your turn.
They have coronations.
You run a couple of times, or at least once. Nobody gets it first time out.
But as John-
Which Democrats are doing that now.
Which is Democrats. Yeah, now you got that's the Democrats.
As John suggests, though, I mean, I think this does set up for a governor to emerge if these governors who are looking at it aren't too damaged, to emerge as a front runner at some point.
I mean, I think you could see maybe 6 governors on the Republican side run. I mean,
And we haven't mentioned Jeb Bush.
Or Rick Perry from Texas.
Or Rick Perry
Speaking of
wants-
having run before,
My guess is he's trying to run.
Well, he's certainly doing everything to allow himself to run. Whether he will actually do it, I don't think we know at this point. But he's spending this year putting himself in a position to make the decision to do so.
Do you think we'll see as many debates this presidential election as last time out?
Well, not if the Republican Party has anything to say about it. There's a consensus. Now, what could break, which is that there were too many last time, it created this circus atmosphere. The only thing that breaks that consensus is the candidates who are in the second tier, who want to get their moment in the sun. And also, by the way, networks that want to have good rock'em sock'em events on a stage.
Symbiosis there, John. Yeah.
And so, but that's also for Hillary Clinton the challenge. I mean, you mentioned Eisenhower. At least there was a Taft with Eisenhower who was fighting within the Republican Party. With Hillary Clinton on the stage, unless it's a nice we're all friends kind of thing, if it's not, a debate is a moment where
Why is she going to give Brian Schweitzer an hour? Exactly.
Right, exactly. An hour just to wallop on her and make her defend everything about the Obama administration that a lot of liberals are disappointed with.
But part of the problem with the debates last time was that there were a lot of, let's put it nicely, JV players on the field. There weren't a lot of varsity athletes. You put a varsity athlete on a debate stage, that's actually good for Republicans. Those debates were terrible because it brought out the very worst of what the Republicans were, trying to be or trying to promote.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun this morning. Glad to have all of you. We'll be back with some analysis on the international news next.